I started to do a lot of just little construction projects in my backyard with my son. And, I was like, this is my moment where I'm going to follow my bliss. I think it was a beautiful moment. And so I put an ad in my daughter's preschool newsletter, said I had a home office for sale because at that time everyone was trying to work from home. So I had this home office sale. Someone called me up the next day and was like, do you still have it left? And I was like, yes, I have one left. And I quickly sold it, ordered the materials, and started building it in my backyard. That was a
I love
tremendous
it.
learning experience, and that was my jump. That was my jump, and I loved it. I mean, I haven't looked back since then. I've just been absolutely adoring what I do. Um,
So you literally said yes in my backyard then,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Not a NIMBY, a Yesy,
not an MB.
a Yesy.
Yeah.
Welcome to Housing Matters, the podcast that covers everything real estate, from buying your first home to building your investment portfolio. Hosted by me, Matt Pouliot, of Pouliot Real Estate. Each episode brings expert insights, smart strategies, and real talk on housing and affordability. If it's about real estate, it matters here.
And I'm thrilled to have joining us today the CEO and founder of Origin Studios, Brian English. Brian brings a diverse background in global housing solutions, having advised Fortune 500 firms, including John Deere, Caterpillar, Freeport McMoran, BHP, and more. And today we have Brian joining us to talk more about Origin Studios and also the solutions that they have to our housing crisis. So, Brian, thank you for being here today.
Thank you so much for having me, Matt.
So, Brian, I want to jump right into it. Looking at this from a global housing to local solutions perspective, and talk a little bit about your journey.
Mm-hmm.
You've worked on housing solutions across the globe, from urban slums in India to resilient infrastructure in the Caribbean. I'm envious of your passport stamps. Was there a moment or experience that made you really realize that modular ADUs could be a part of the solution back here at home?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can lead you up to the aha moment just to give you a little background about how I got to there. So I studied urban planning, environmental science, then urban planning, and I really had this focus on housing and the emerging markets, let's say, where development was happening really fast. And I was just really interested in how can we help countries leapfrog development and integrate some sustainable solutions long before they got down the road that we and other developed countries are. So right away, I got Hurricane Ivan hit in the Caribbean, and the Congress gave $30 million to help the region recover, and I was fortunate enough to get a management position on that project, and I managed housing projects, basically small houses. We're helping low-income families across the Caribbean recover, and there was a lot of disaster mitigation and how do we build the capacity of local builders to make things stronger. And then I did a lot of other projects, and then fast forward to India with the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation, where I lived for 3 years, and that was focused on slum upgrading. There's millions, there's 1 billion people around the world that lives in slums. And so really the focus was how do we create scalable solutions? Like, what does a scalable intervention look like? So all of that really, I think, was key for me because I was building houses, developing programs to build houses, working with policymakers to get housing built, and they all had a very small footprint. So then forward to the pandemic. At that time, I was working for the Foundation for Puerto Rico, again, helping the island recover from Hurricane Maria, but doing a lot of economic development work. And I think we all had our come to Jesus moment during the pandemic. And so what are we doing? And so I spent a lot of time in my backyard. And, I'm a very hands-on person. I love building. And I started to do a lot of just little construction projects in my backyard with my son. And, I was like, this is my moment where I'm going to follow my bliss. I think it was a beautiful moment. And so I put an ad in my daughter's preschool newsletter, said I had a home office for sale because at that time everyone was trying to work from home. So I had this home office sale. Someone called me up the next day and was like, do you still have it left? And I was like, yes, I have one left. And I quickly sold it, ordered the materials, and started building it in my backyard. That was a
I love
tremendous
it.
learning experience, and that was my jump. That was my jump, and I loved it. I mean, I haven't looked back since then. I've just been absolutely adoring what I do. Um,
So you literally said yes in my backyard then,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Not a NIMBY, a Yesy,
not an MB.
a Yesy.
Yeah,
Yeah,
nice.
yeah,
So you have this aha moment, and you basically that's where you started with creating offices, prefab
yeah,
offices that we now probably colloquially refer to as accessory dwelling
yeah,
units that people weren't dwelling in, right? They were just
yeah,
office
yeah,
space.
yeah. So I quickly, after that project, I realized that the market is in ADUs, accessory dwelling units. Not home offices. Home offices were a small moment in time where everyone needed one, but really it's ADUs. Um, and it just, there's a lot of things that align here, um, which make a lot of sense. So I think just to draw the thread from my earlier work of like looking at scalable solutions, small is beautiful, the economists of, how do we generate local solutions? And it's not always bigger, better. It's really this infill, smaller, manageable, affordable solution. And also because ADUs are smaller, they lend themselves to modularity. So, for me, it was like, oh, um, there's a lot of things coming together. This makes a lot of sense, and I'm understanding why a lot of people are looking for them. So then on the demographic side, you have like what they call the sandwich generation, I think, where they're taking care of kids and parents. And I see a lot of
Mm,
that in my work where, people are looking to develop ADUs to help a parent, age and place closer to them, to support their kids when they get out of college, to support them in their home office, to create some rental income. I mean, there's all these benefits of ADUs, um, which we already know. But I think that, as I'm looking at this, I'm seeing all these other cities start to make policies that support ADUs and states. So, California, Maine, Massachusetts, I mean, they've all passed statewide policies that support ADUs, California being the leading one, let's say.
yeah, it's interesting you mentioned this because the largest builder in Maine right now for residential housing is probably one of your competitors, a company called Backyard ADUs.
Mm,
And they're doing something like 400 homes a year, which makes them the largest builder in Maine, which, if you go to other parts of the country where you've been and done work, people would say, I build 400 homes a year. That's cute, because people are sometimes track builders doing thousands.
hmm
So what I'm hearing from you is that Massachusetts and other states face big challenges around affordability, zoning, and housing supply. But for the average listener that can't find housing or has an elderly parent that needs assisted living, and that's out of reach for them, how is an accessory dwelling unit uniquely positioned to address that challenge?
Yeah. I mean, I think what I saw in the pandemic, first of all, was that ADUs are proximity and boundaries. The pandemic, everyone was on top of each other and we all
Hmm.
wanted some space. Putting an extension on your house, you're still living together. An ADU, you've got that separation. And then with an ADU, also, you don't have the land development costs because you already own the land. So that you're just more looking at a foundation and the unit. Um, so I think that it's appealing from that perspective because you're essentially building another dwelling right on your property and you're not having to fork out as much cash.
Hmm.
So there's that, and then there's that it's a local solution. You're not having to move somewhere; it's right there. If your parents are living somewhere else, which oftentimes they are, and that one of the parents has passed, and then you have a widow or something moving closer to their family. I see a lot of it. So.
Hmm.
Um,
Who is your biggest client, like as a cohort, the largest demographic of adopters?
I'd say it's the ones we're talking about. These, yeah, it's probably bell-shaped curve with the sandwich generation being those, and then some younger couples who have the income to invest, create additional space for them, create guest homes for people to visit them, do a little Airbnb on the side. And then I have some older couples that are really just thinking about for their kids. They're making an investment in their property. It's sort of a legacy investment that will be passed down to their kids, and it supports them, for their kids who live in New Jersey to come to California and stay. So, I think people are getting really, if you look at the census, intergenerational living is going up data-wise. And I think because the housing market is so constrained from an affordability perspective, people are just coming up with solutions. And it's probably another interesting, tie back to my earlier work, because most of the world lives that way. I mean,
I know it's really a unique issue in America where we have this hyper
yeah,
individualism that drives us to almost feel like it's a faux pas. I mean, we say it all the time, right? Oh, my kid went to college and then they moved back in my
yeah,
basement on my couch. I got to get my kid out.
yeah.
And it's like I just helped a young man who is a refugee from the Middle East who came here with his family. They originally went to Arizona and originally came to Maine eventually in time. They were living in an apartment. He was a student, and anyway, reached out to do an internship. We struck a relationship, and I said to him, Ahmed, you should consider buying your own home. And he's like, yep, I'm definitely going to do that. So he was the primary signer on the mortgage, but his father was a co-signer. So at 19 years old, he qualified for and got a mortgage on a home that him and his whole entire family live in,
Mm-hmm.
which the majority of 19-year-olds in the US aren't even contemplating buying a home, let alone the idea that their family would stay there too, And to him, it was just like not a foreign concept at all because
Yeah,
this is the way they operate.
yeah, yeah. A very different mindset. Yeah. I,
Yeah.
I
And go ahead.
I have one client in Menlo Park. She is retiring. She can't afford to retire. Her brother lives in Menlo Park. She lives in that area further south, and her brother is letting her retire in his backyard. So,
Hmm.
it works. I mean, it makes sense. Like, she can afford it, and he's got the space to do it. I guess they have a good enough relationship that they're, can do that. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. Like this is a whole new movement, the RIMBYs, retire in my backyard.
yeah, indeed.
But really, this is a challenge, and I was interested to hear that your adoption is more among sandwich, because in my mind, I was thinking you have this whole Maine in particular, such an aging population that has these big old farmhouses that they can't afford to bring up. They've got stairs and repairs to do. It's a
Hmm.
thing that I say often. And they like want away from that so they could maybe get into something
Yeah.
like, Skylark, for instance,
Yep.
760 square feet
Hmm.
that you guys offer for under $250,000. They own the place
Hmm.
and just stick it in the backyard on the land they already own and then sell the house out front. I would think that that would happen more often,
Yeah.
but it doesn't seem like that's
Well,
happening as much as one might think.
that is correct. I do have, and I think that one maybe an interesting thing is, I span from California to Massachusetts.
Mm.
I'm licensed state by state, the factory. So on the East Coast, that is in fact, I see a lot more of people saying to me, my house is not, I want to live here. We're aging, we're retiring, but to widen these doorways and figure out how to make this work from a mobility perspective is just astronomical in terms of the renovation costs. So I think that is correct what you're saying, that ADUs do offer that opportunity for people even to invest in space that they can age in. They can move into that, and then they can even rent their main home. I see that
Yeah.
too.
Yeah, or if zoning allows for it, turn it into a duplex or something and have more rental income. I've seen a lot of people at that age don't really want to be a landlord, it seems like, and so that's certainly a part of it. But
Hmm.
interesting, to the extent that when you buy your ADU, you also get training to be a landlord. Maybe more people would take it up. I don't know. Prefab and modular housing are really gaining a lot of traction, it seems like. And what makes Origin Studios' approach to modular different, and how do you intentionally blend design and architecture into your process? Also, it seems like you're trying to do that in the lens of keeping it attainable.
Hmm. Yeah. Um, so I think, as a company focused on accessory dwelling units as a specific market, somewhat would set us apart from other modular home builders. And I think that having that specialty, we have a sort of set of expertise on permitting these, for example, craning them, all the things that people go through in terms of extending utilities from the main home to that. So I think that in itself sort of limits like who my competitors are or what separates us. And then I put a high premium on design. There's a lot of my background lends itself to, dignity and of individuals and the houses we live in and how design informs that. And, there's a whole history of shoddy, low investment apartment buildings for low income solutions, right? So
Mhm.
I have a strong penchant to, give the highest quality design that I can because it's, it doesn't cost money and it's something that I bring to the table. So I think in all of in our units, there's this emphasis on high design, high quality. I don't compromise on this stuff. It's not a race to the bottom for me. It's really
Mm.
quality that I'm focused on. And and then I have a sustainability focused of my every one of my units passes the California Title 24 Energy Efficiency Certificate, which is the most rigorous in the country. So the energy demand of these is very low, insulation's very high. They're very sustainable from that standpoint. And then I think it's the customer experience. I think that we're a high touch, customer centric company. I myself am driven by, I say to plan is human, to implement is divine. And that
Mm.
the name Origin Studio comes from that. It's like, how do we take a concept from its origin and manifest it into being? So, that process is really sacred to me as a designer, as an urban planner, as an artist, and as a builder. I I love that part of the work. When we meet a client, help them bring this thing to life, when it lands in the yard, it is just, it's
So you come alongside your clients as like a quasi developer, kind of helping them understand what they need to do for impact fees or extending the water and sewer, or oh, your sewer's not big enough for this demand. Here's where we're going to work through all that with them.
yeah, yeah.
And that's all part of the price, or is there a separate
No,
planning price
it's
too?
part of the price. And early on, I did have an add-on price for permitting, let's say, but now I've incorporated into it because what happens is if the client tries to handle the permit, it's actually going to mess it up, or it's more likely not going to work out. So it's kind of like just let me handle it type thing. Um,
Yep.
uh, but yes, I think that's also what's interesting about modular is that, if you were to go traditional stick build construction for an ADU, you'd have to get a design and then you'd have to have the engineering stamps for it, find a builder, and you don't know what the price is for it because you're going to have to look at what's locally available, who can take you on, who's willing to build it. Whereas modular, I have a full-time architect, I have my engineer that approves these things, and then we do the state design review and inspection. So all of those sort of soft costs are built into the price of it, and it makes it a much easier, more turnkey solution. So that I think is one benefit, of modular, and certainly something we try to emphasize as a company.
So let's say someone's listening to this, which we hope this happens, and says, "Hey, I want one of these in my backyard. Could I build an ADU in my backyard?" I would know that the answer to that question in Maine is yes, because of LD 2003, which I helped shepherd through the legislature while I was there. But there's more to it than that. Like I, added an ADU myself after this law went into effect, only to find out we had to increase the septic tank size because in order to have another dwelling unit, even though it was in a daylight basement of a building, not a separate building,
Yep.
the septic tank, no bedroom count was changing. We were going to make a studio dwelling unit, and but the tank, because of 2 units, needed to be made bigger. So I'm sure this is like a common thing that you run into. So, I mean, could I build an ADU in my backyard? probably the answer to everybody is maybe we need to explore further. But what does that look like next?
Yeah. I mean, when I have someone approach me, I'll first look at their address and just look from a bird's eye view of what is access to the site, because that's, the feasibility study, let's say, is, is there access to the yard? And, we're really usually looking at craning, and how far can we crane, and, that. And then a more detailed feasibility would be looking, like you're saying, at utilities. And I do site visits with all of my clients, so that we're looking at the yard, looking at it together, really understanding what's going to go into all of those site works, because site works in themselves are a bundle of things that are unique to every single site. Modular units can be, the design is the design, but how do we make it work at that yard?
Yeah, what percentage of people that reach out to you have like a site that you just is not going to be workable, would you say?
I Most of my sites work. I have had one, let's call it failed delivery at the first time, but the second time it worked, because we have these semis that come in. They're 80-foot long, essentially. They're usually parking on the streets. In this one particular case, the driveway needed to be widened. It wasn't widened. And as much of a forecast we had given the person, they didn't make it happen. So we couldn't get the trucks in, the crane couldn't reach, and we had to sort of bring the things back to the factory and then do take two once the driveway got widened. But it is in any residential property. The things that make it tricky are above electric lines, crane wise, and that's different. I mean, some neighborhoods are all underground. If a line is there, it can be temporarily disconnected and moved out of the way on delivery day, and we do that. It just adds one more piece to orchestrate at the delivery, but that's something. And then it's, big trees and things. And even those you can get around. I mean, I always say we put a man on the moon, we can get a modular unit in a backyard.
Yeah,
It's kind of hard not
I
to
love
be
it.
able to do it. And the cranes, we end up that most crane operators will give us a very big crane, with a big 145 foot reach. Our units, I'll also say, are not more than, say, 13,000 pounds. It's about 40 pounds per square foot. So each module is about, let's call it 15,000 pounds. So it's not a significant weight. You know,
Well, I recently talked with these guys. I don't know if their company will ever get off the ground, no pun intended, but they wanted to use blimps to deliver modular housing. Because they're like, if we make a blimp that will move the house around,
uh
and then we just like drop it in from above, get over all this bullshit of the roads and the
uh
infrastructure and everything. I'm like, wow, that's an interesting idea.
Yeah, that's interesting. I like it. I mean, it's like Up, the movie, right? You just put a bunch of
Yeah,
balloons on the top.
yeah,
I think,
exactly.
yeah, I think a
Well,
helicopter would give you a little bit more maneuverability than.
yeah. Let's try Swarovski first, whatever that is. Big one. This leads really well into the next question, though, that I had for you, which is, what are some of the biggest hurdles, whether they're regulatory, logistical, or even cultural, that stand in the way of widespread ADU adoption? And then how are you as an organization navigating that? Are you taking a proactive policy change approach and getting like an activist organization, or more just working within the confines of what's created?
So I'd say, from an operational perspective, permitting is the biggest challenge for us as a company. We're not just a local company working in one city where we just have an ongoing relationship with the permit office. We're across many cities. So every city has its own permitting procedure, and that is a handful. We're getting better and better at it as we do them. And I think some cities are, they're less familiar with permitting ADUs. The policy might pass, but the practice of, giving a permit for these locally,
Mm.
is not always there. I will say with modular, the benefit is that there's the state is involved and there's the state design review and the permitting. So the unit itself that I built is permitted by the state. Locally, we're just pursuing a permit for the site works. And that's sort of an important distinction and part of what speeds up the process in modular, because a lot of things can be pursued simultaneously.
Yeah, I want to hang tight on that just for a minute
Yeah.
because I don't think people listening understand
Hmm.
the power of offsite construction vis-a-vis code compliance, right? So some states are third-party verification and some states aren't, right? Do I understand that correctly? Meaning the local code officer will just take in and say, this has already been stamped by the state, I'm good to go. And I think other places, that's not necessarily the case. But with a traditional site-built home, every part of the process, like we're done the framing, come check out to make sure the framing's done. Okay, the drywall's up, come make sure we're good to paint.
Yeah.
All this stuff has already been done in your process.
Yeah. That's exactly right. Yeah. When you're doing traditional construction, you'll put the rebar in for the foundation, the inspector comes, inspects it, then you can pour the concrete and on and on and on. With modular, we are inspected in the factory and we build inside out, which is also interesting because we don't have the weather to deal with. So we start our drywall first. And then we can do the plumbing, electric, mechanical, and then we can start doing interiors while we wait for inspectors to come. So it's open from the outside.
Wow, that's smart. So you can be kind of getting your interior finishes done while the plumbing's still being running in the wall or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
Wow, I had never seen that before.
Yeah.
That's creative.
Yeah. And so then there's also the design review. So we have, I have an engineer do my structurals, an architect do the architectural, and then we submit them to the state, and the state will review them and give them a stamp. So they're getting reviewed multiple times. So the benefit of that is like my 6 modules that I sell, 6 models, they're already been stamped in the states that I work in.
Which are what states? Well, maybe it'd be easier to say what states you don't work in.
Yeah, I'm California, Massachusetts, New York, and I don't have any clients in Maine yet, so I haven't gotten licensed.
You probably will soon after this
Yeah,
call.
let's hope. Let's hope. Yeah.
I was looking at the pricing of some of this stuff. I'm like, this is really attractive when you look at, less than $3 a square foot for a delivered product that looks beautiful. That seems to me to be really attainable for many people.
Yeah.
We can't build for less than 300 a foot right now, even taking out land costs in Maine.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it just gets worse the smaller the home is.
Yeah.
Which the irony is we're trying to hit this market with smaller footprints because the average size home in America in the 1950s was like 950 square feet. Now it's 2,400 because of a whole host of reasons.
Yeah.
So it does seem like folks are kind of trending back, but then in Maine, or maybe you experience this in Massachusetts, you have this aging demographic that doesn't want to give up their big home with all their stuff. I don't know. It's a difficult reconciliation.
Yeah. I think that with an ADU, you've got all of the same stuff that would go into a house, a kitchen, a bathroom, and that involves tile and countertops and cabinets and all the expensive things. If you looked at the price per square foot, for just square footage not related to those things, it's probably cheaper to expand it. But you do have all those built-in costs, price per square foot might be higher in some ways. But I think the benefit of modular, which is so good, is that you're not restricted to your geography. And, like real estate, is like local. And with modular, it's like, okay, where can I get the best price? And the ability to shop nationally is great,
Yeah, definitely. Especially if the product that you're buying has been vetted out by some of the highest standards in the country, then you know that it will work here.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of the third-party verifier stamping it once, and then you go to market with whoever wants to buy it.
Yep.
Do you have to get each model stamps like separately? Would someone have to place an order for each one of the ones before you could say, hey, we're good to go in Maine? Or you pretty much know that if they pick this solstice, that all the rest of them could get approved?
Yeah, I think um, I'm meeting really high standards in California, and that makes it's much easier to hit the housing standards or the code standards in other places. So, yeah, so each state, once it's stamped in that state, I can rebuild it for 3 years. Uh, so, but again, that's something that I can pursue simultaneous to local permits. And, I start building most of the time before I even have a permit locally, just because
Mhm.
then, the site works come last and you don't have to have a construction site in your yard until the very end. With traditional construction, it's from beginning to end, your yard is the factory, you know.
Yeah. And also, I would imagine for a guy like you that owns a company or CEO, like, hey, what's the risk if I build a solstice and this guy doesn't take it, somebody else will somewhere else
Exactly.
because it's made to the same standard.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Have you guys been pursuing like any kind of policy changes at all as an organization, or have you kind of stayed out of those waters for now?
I'm not in a lobbying perspective, but I definitely am sort of a stakeholder informant for a lot of cities. The city of Boston, in fact, consulted me on their ADU policy, Bloomington, Indiana. And then what a lot of cities do, which is smart, is that they'll pre-approve some designs. So they'll
Mm,
say, here's 6 builders and 6 modules that we as a city have pre-approved. If you
love it.
to help make it easier, and a lot of cities are doing that. So, we do try and get it. It's a big country, lots of cities, so we can't be everywhere, but we do pursue, certain markets in that case. And then we're also always developing relationships with local contractors, in areas that can then we can recommend to go do the site works.
So if somebody were listening to this, like me, I guess, and I live in the capital city of Maine, and I was like, hey, I want to do some work to get, Origin Studios buildings pre-approved for a catalog of homes in Augusta, that basically somebody would just already have a building permit, like click the button on the website because it's already part of the catalog.
Hmm.
Sounds like you guys are pursuing that.
Yeah.
The state is actually working at the state level to develop a catalog of homes in Maine.
Hmm.
There's actually a working group on that right now. And to me, it seems like a no-brainer to take, and even if it weren't just one company, but from other options that might, obviously, I'm sure as the owner of a company, be like, great if it was just ours. Rising tide raises all boats. Like one of the things you didn't mention, but I'm curious your thought on this. And I don't know if you run into this elsewhere, but like in Maine, for instance, and I'd imagine there's other states that are like this for our larger audience. There's only 9 approved modular home set crews. 9. That's it. So, like, in order to have the home set on the foundation that I buy from you, it can't be done by you unless you're licensed by the state of Maine to be a modular home installer and have a crew to do that.
Hmm.
And right now, that's been a huge logistical
Hmm.
challenge for us because you're going to have all the pricing aligned and you have the, and then if there isn't a crew to set it on the foundation that's licensed, then nothing happens.
Yeah. Yeah. That seems.
Is that a problem elsewhere, or would
I
that?
have not run into that elsewhere, and that sounds like unnecessary too, because setting a home is not hard. I mean, technically,
No.
it's not. It's
You could have a contractor that's been in the business for 30 years and they're told you can't set that home on that foundation. It's like, why not? I've been building homes for 30 years.
yeah.
We actually just sent Cece, who is doing our podcast, we worked with an organization to go down to Portland last week to video a set so that we can work with the community college system to create a set crew academy, essentially, where people could get a credential to get this designation, even if they've been building houses for 20
Uh-huh.
years, like pretty quickly.
Uh-huh. That's cool. That's great.
Yeah.
That's
I
wonderful.
mean, we're going to need to do this kind of work nationally in order to adopt a solution to a problem that is like so evident that is the right course of action.
Yeah.
You're building while the site's being ready, so it's killing 2 birds with 1 stone, really.
Yeah. 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 That's interesting.
So yeah, yeah. I'm curious if you run into that elsewhere, would love to know because maybe it's just a unique Maine problem, but.
Yes. I think East Coast tends to have more of these quirky regulations.
Mhm.
It's interesting. Like, you have really more like in some cases on a site when I'm setting a house, the crane operators are active, I'm active, the builder's active. It's all like a team sport. And then in places like in New York, it'll be the crane guys standing there with the arms crossed, waiting to do their one piece, and
Yeah.
nobody's moving outside their lane. And that's really hard for me because I'm just such a hands-on collaborative, let's make this happen thing. So you do have that sort of mindset. So when it's put in policy, like you're saying, in a regulation, that it only reinforces that type of more individualized specialty skill set and sector, which I don't think helps, except maybe to I don't know, protecting a market for a tradesman to he's not going to be boxed out of that, but it's
The 9 installers.
yeah, but it's not in terms of
Yeah.
reducing risk. I mean, if the policy is there to protect public interest, I don't think that it's such a high risk thing to set a home that you would need a specialty installer.
Hmm.
That's my opinion, but maybe this,
Especially some of these smaller ones. It's not
yeah,
like it's,
yeah,
yeah, no, that's great. But I agree with you. Yeah. I mean, it's a regulatory barrier that need not be there because it's in the way of housing production, which can help increase supply
hmm,
and hopefully stabilize, if not maybe in time, reduce pricing,
yeah,
particularly if there's broader adoption of this approach.
yeah.
So you've led some large scale community development efforts before
Hmm,
Origin Studios,
hmm.
and how does that experience kind of shape your philosophy in the design of the ADUs, and how do you ensure that you're kind of promoting that sense of community and dignity,
Yeah.
not just adding additional square footage?
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, housing housing has always been more about, it's not just shelter, it is dignity, and it is citizenship. I mean, like, just to back up a sec, like a slum by definition is someone who doesn't have, you know, sturdy structure, access to water, access to sanitation, and might not have clear land title. And so that instability doesn't support investing in a space, because it's hard to invest in a space if you might get kicked out of it. So I've always seen,
Mm.
and then if you think of like groups of people living in a city, we see it also in the U.S. too, like renters. Once someone moves from a renter to becoming a homeowner, you have a different sense of where you belong in the city, your sense of who you are, all of these things. So, you know, I it's interesting. After I stopped that work in India, I started a book. I've written chapters of it that have been put in other books, but it was called Searching for Citizenship in Our Cities and Ourselves. And sort of looking at that spectrum of who am I, where do I belong, from the inside out to where do I occupy, that has fascinated me and propelled a lot of my work. So I think ADUs lend themselves to that because you're really catering to a population who is, creating a space that usually is focused on, you know, aging in place, which is really a dignity, access, comfort thing, affordability, things like that. So I think that's the maybe philosophy and background that I see sort of informing how I approach it. And then I think, I can't not think like an urban planner. So while I can get micro and think, okay, this yard has these issues and we're going to solve it this way, I'm always looking at, a city perspective and what is the policy and how is that shaping the way the city is developing. So, I'm always sort of yo-yoing in from, addressing specific project needs to managing the company and then working with city officials on, different policy things. And I think as the company grows and as I have sort of more systems in place and I'm able to do a little bit more policy work, I would love to you know use the resource of the enterprise of Origin Studio to contribute to things like the fire victims in California. We're going
Yeah.
to have other issues like that. There's just so many different areas where the efficiencies of a modular home factory like I have now, could lend itself. I'm not also like a pure enterprise, dollar drives everything, an enterprise with a purpose, or B Corps as at some point. And, I don't know what you would call me, but I'm not going to let go of that piece because I'm very,
Like a social entrepreneur.
yeah. And that's right. I did a lot of that also when we were in India, social entrepreneurship. Yeah, I mean, that might be what I could call myself. I'm straddling multiple worlds, and it's fun. I like it.
Yeah.
The bigger and the more complex, the more interesting for me.
Yeah, definitely. We always have that creative itch that needs to be scratched, and some people do that like through hobbies or whatever,
Yeah,
and other people do it through their work.
yeah,
And I think that ultimately, it's really kind of a blessing when you can do it through your
mhm,
work. I've gotten finally arrived to a place in life where I feel like I'm doing
yeah,
that now. And a lot of it is more in the creative space. I mean, we have a brokerage, which is a successful brokerage and doing well and will continue to do well,
mhm,
but really more of this development or having these kind of conversations with people about like, hey, what are we doing to like change the narrative actually, as opposed to just live the narrative,
yeah,
however it plays out.
yeah,
And it seems like that's what you're committing to a lot
yeah,
with your time now. I mean, because you could probably be gobbled up by any Fortune 500 company out there to go join the C-suite and kind of chase their bottom line. But
yeah, yeah. And again, I think it comes back to this, like maybe it was the pandemic moment. What are we doing with it?
it was a terrible situation for the world population, but I think probably a blessing in
Mhm.
disguise in terms of getting creative pursuits off the ground that might have otherwise just been
Yeah.
put on a shelf.
And I think, the other interesting thing, talk about aging in place and during the pandemic and the nursing homes and, you know, I think that everyone during the pandemic was like, I don't want to go into a nursing home, and I think that informs a lot of people as they think about their parents or themselves.
Hmm.
And
Yeah,
so
definitely.
ADUs really are a solution for that.
So help me understand what your current like annual production capacity is like. And I know that probably the answer to that's a function of like what size unit is being built, but on your average size that you're making, what size is it, and about how many units you guys make in a year?
So we're growing from the first one I did in my driveway. Then we moved into a 6,000 square foot factory. Everyone told me I would grow out of that in no time, but at that point I was like, I don't know, I don't know if this is going to get off the ground. But we did quickly grow out of that. And now we're in a 20,000 square foot factory. So we have the capacity to build 13 units at a time. That varies obviously by the square footage of the unit, but that's just a rough number to use in terms of how many we can produce at a time. Um, uh, so I think, we're ramping up. I think if you looked over a year, we're delivering one a month. We're not giant at this point, um, but it's okay because I think I'm growing organically, and I'm not pushing anything beyond what we can do and have the capacity to do. And I've had to learn a lot of lessons in these early, what do you call it? Proof of concept, let's say, the early
Hmm.
stages. This year is a big year for us because now I feel like I have the capacity to take on more orders. So I'm doing that. And having the bigger space has also allowed me to do that. So, the tap has sort of like been opened up some and a lot more can flow. Um, I've done this all with my own resources. I haven't taken any loans or anything. So
Hmm.
that is something I'm exploring, finding the right type of investment that would support me to scale up even more. Um, and that's exciting for me. So that's So that's what I'd say in terms of overall production where we are right now, and I think we're in this very sweet spot. We partnered with the Kelley Business School. This year they gave us 250 MBA students, and
Wow.
they focus exclusively on our company for this semester, which was amazing. They broke
Wow.
up into groups of five. So what is that? 50 groups of five each looked at the company and made recommendations. They did these pitch style things where they made recommendations around sales and operations and the financial aspect. So I got some really good ideas from that, and even some.
That's a godsend.
Yeah, it was amazing. So that was also that just happened this spring. So that was a big boost of energy. Uh, and
Congratulations. That's awesome. For them to pick you says
yeah,
a lot,
yeah, just to be
about what you're
chosen,
doing.
and then the benefit of having all of these eyes in it, and then each of these students, they've run businesses themselves. They're out there thinking about how they can do it, so they've already contacted me to say, hey, I could host one as a showroom here in, Joshua Tree, part of California or whatever. Um,
Hmm.
so that's that. And then in terms of units, I started with smaller units, and then as I've been designing bigger ones, a different part of the market is, gravitating towards me and saying, oh, great, I've been following you. Now that you're producing these larger units, more what I was interested in.
Yeah, because I wanted to ask you about that specifically because obviously an ADU connotes to a lot of people tiny home or something small in the backyard. But you have some now that are bigger than what the average size of the home was in
Yeah,
1950s,
yeah,
and you asked like up to 1,200 square feet.
yeah,
So that could be like somebody could just call you and say, I actually just want this as a house,
yeah.
right? Or am I wrong
No,
about
that's right.
that? Okay.
They could do that. That's
Yeah.
right. Yeah. And some people want to max out if they're allowed to develop 1,200 square feet for an ADU. They want to max it out. They don't want to do anything less than that. So from an investment perspective, they're looking for larger, bigger things like that.
How do you, as the chief and charter of the organization, decide, well, what do I do next in my product mix? Do I look at doing a stacked unit so that I can get 1,200 square feet on less footprint? Are these things that you guys are exploring?
Hmm. I do a lot of custom units also. So a lot of that it will inform designs. So I will, and I'm letting the market come to me. They're saying this is what I'm interested in. I'd like this, but one more bedroom. And so a lot of the times I'll use those clients to develop that model. So I'm working with the client on developing a model, I'm telling them that, this is something that I will um, permit and sell to others. And so I'm able to offer them some of those benefits too. So that's largely how I've been doing it. So like on two-story ones, I haven't been doing them, but now I've got two-story ones because that's what the client wants, and that's where I want to play in that space. So I'm happy to take on these clients and navigate that.
It's an interesting approach because there's some competitors that I think about, like, but maybe not great. But just in terms of my feeble brain, like Villa, for instance, the largest, prefab builder in California, who their model seems to say they only have these like handful of options, and they find manufactured companies to be their, like they go when there's slack in the line for these different companies that build it. So they don't have their own factory at all, actually, is my understanding. They just sub out to when there's slack in the line, and they can only do that because these are like the four things I'm going to make, and I'm only do these four things. So you fit it in when you can make me 10, you fit it in when you can make me 20.
Hmm.
That's kind of like one approach. And then you have Boxable, same thing, like their go to market Casita was like 440 feet or
Hmm.
something. And like that's a very unique kind of fold
Yeah,
out design. We have discussions on how it
yeah,
looks
yeah,
probably forever,
yeah.
but their go to market is real. And you seem to be striking a different tone, which is we're willing, maybe it's just because of the size, I don't know, or your plan, but to be making kind of a custom home builder in our factory,
Hmm.
which I wonder how that jives with scalability for broader adoption.
Yeah. I when I first started the company, I looked at two models. One, could I hire a company that manufacturer to manufacture my models? But again, since I was doing it all on my own dime, I didn't have a huge pipeline to offer them to say, hey, so that didn't seem to make sense for me. So then it was like, okay, then I'm producing these things. And I guess it has been organic growth, like I've said. So I see my designs resonate with people. I think I've got this sort of signature stamp of these warm woods and modern metals and high ceilings and lots of light. I mean, that's what you're going to get in any one of my models. And along with 2x6 walls, lots of insulation, lots of energy efficiency. And that's just that is what I want to produce. I don't want to produce anything less quality than that. So when I have people that have gone to Villa and then come to me because they will say, it was too vanilla. Like it was nice, but I want something that makes me excited.
More sexy.
Yeah, more sexy. So I think that's what
Yeah.
we're offering. And I think, just all the skill sets that I bring, I think because I am a designer and, entrepreneur, like I think I'm able to think in lots of different ways. It's not a compartmentalized, hey, let's get some architects to come up with some designs for us. No, it's me saying, okay, this makes sense. So I think that's what's driving me as an enterprise. I do think, obviously the repeatability and scalability of these things is what's going to help the company grow. And so, my portfolio um, of ADUs is, growing in that case. The other thing I've done is develop partnerships with real estate agents in California. So with Compass Realty, for example, and the other one called The Agency. And I'm working a commission-based model because all of my marketing has been online through social media. I was getting three leads a day when I first started. It was just like flooding in. And then I've developed a more person-based warm lead model where I'm working with agents who I know and trust. They're referring me to their customers who are looking to develop ADUs, and that's really working well. So, I think I'm just getting back to this, like what is going to make it scalable and how do you make it scalable?
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense because, like, in the one vein, you're like, okay, offsite construction is immensely scalable and can be faster. But, like, we see this with KBS Homes in Maine, for instance, that they're a custom home builder in a factory. They manufacture modular homes, but they can be all these different things. And they're able to kind of make it a little bit faster from automation, like with their saws and stuff. At the end of the day, they're owned by a publicly traded company, right?
Mm-hmm.
Which wants them to be getting certain numbers and so
Yeah.
forth. And I found that for people that wanted to rely on the speed of offsite, then run into a buzzsaw with the fact that they're only able to produce so many units in a period of time because they're doing different ones all the time. So like and I'm just thinking out loud here in terms of if there were a development community that wanted to use offsite construction, they would just need to have certain timelines that could be met in terms of what was going forward. It seems like you guys can give people pretty predictable timelines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah, I think I've got a handle on timelines now. The only wild card usually is the permitting, but we're getting better and better at that and quicker in our turnarounds and answering comments from the permit reviewers and things like that. But that
because we have a broad audience of people that listen that are developers, and so just like, hey, Origin Studios, I want 10, Solstice.
Yeah.
Like, how long would that take?
So production wise, a few months we could produce it in. I mean, for me,
Wow.
yeah. So for me, it's my things I'm dealing with are permits, cash flow, and the production process. So keeping all those things moving forward, keeping the money flow from the client coming in to build it, keeping the permits moving forward. So if someone wanted, a developer said, hey, I've got land, I'm approved to build on this, I want to buy 10 units. I can definitely. Now I'm very comfortable in saying that I could, take on an order like that in terms of the manpower that I have and the resources to scale that, the space in the factory and the ability to produce that many. And that sort of more B2B, let's say, business model is also like where I would like to go also, right now.
Hmm.
Um, but, it's all about bandwidth and, making myself available to pursue these conversations.
Yeah, because once you create the big furnace, you got to keep putting fuel on the
Yeah,
fire, or else the thing just snuffs itself out,
yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah. I will
A
say
la mighty buildings.
when I started, I had employees, and that was very hard and unsustainable. So now I'm subcontracting the different trades. I have relationships with the different, the framers and the plumbers and the electricians. So, I'm bringing them in as we have jobs to do the work. So that has definitely reduced my exposure in terms of, like you were saying, keeping the fire going.
Right now, you have a B2C model that really is kind of probably more one-off in orders.
Hmm.
But if a developer that were listening to this wanted to order from you, you have got capacity if they call up the phone and say, hey, I want 10 of the Solstice units within the next 5 months, let's say.
Hmm.
You guys could be building those while they're getting the site ready.
Yeah.
It sounds like you want to go
Yeah.
there. And you were also talking about this network you're building out with realtors. As a realtor myself,
Hmm.
a lot of times the apprehension among our agents is, well, yeah, they say that they can build this, but will it actually happen? Proof is in the pudding. So I think, to the extent of building out that network, seems like you guys are trending toward trying to streamline some processes so that you can give more definitive timelines to people.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. 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 I think we've gotten, yeah. So just to answer the question again, I think working with if a developer had land and came to me and said I want 10 units, that would be music to my ears because it would be a lot easier for me than pursuing 10 permits in 10 different locations. It's
Why are developers doing this? It just seems to me to be a no-brainer, but maybe it's just because I'm a new developer.
I don't know. I don't know. I think I think part of what you're saying in terms of can I trust these people to do this? I think that is part of what I deal with clients is this out of sight, out of mind thing where if they can't see what's happening, they don't even know are we working on it. So I've developed this whole portal, which has made huge improvements where we can put in daily logs of what's happened and they can log in anytime and see where their unit is. Um,
That's
at the
cool.
beginning, I didn't have that, and so it was a lot of okay. Should update these guys, and so it's just streamlining and making that a more regular cadence. So that actually the MBA recommendation helped me set up this portal. So that's been really good. I think, from a real estate agent perspective, one of the things that I've been doing with agents is um, sort of showing it as it's a tool in your arsenal to support your clients. You stay in touch with clients throughout the year, holidays, things like that. But to come to them and say, hey, I've got this opportunity to add value to your property. You know, I vetted them, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, that's like an offer, which I think is interesting. And then also just keeping your clients happy. I have a lot of my high end clients in California, the agents, just want to be of service to their clients. And so if the client's saying, hey, I'm looking for an ADU developer, if they've already met me or come to the factory, vetted me, they can make that. So those, networks of trust, I think, are important and something we've been developing. Um, but then, to the B2B model, like we were saying, I would really like to pursue those. And I was saying that my timeline, for building units would be literally a number of months. If the money's in place, that's the engine in the machine there. So, as long as the flowing, we can produce in a number of months. So I also think that it makes a lot of sense for developers to be looking at this from that perspective.
Yeah. It seems to me that, too, a lot of the issue has a lot to do with financing. And so people needing to give a big chunk of cash in order to get the production started versus a traditional site built model where you might put 20% down on a construction loan, and then that's funded with draws from the bank. And so the cash outlay seems to be bigger. Seems like one of the barriers to this, maybe you've run into it, is, with an ADU, you're looking at going on an existing lot, but if somehow that lot could be split so that the land under it can be amortized with the ADU, that would open up a lot more traditional financing sources. Are you seeing financing really as a barrier for folks, or is that just?
Yeah, it's a barrier for some folks. We've just developed this partnership with Acorn, so now people can pursue loans through us
Good.
with that, which has been great. And I think that there's opportunity there for so many different financing models, even for friends and family, because you're, investing in an asset that can, pay itself off through Airbnb. A lot of people do. And in terms of splitting land, I have seen that. Some of my real estate agents are coming to me with that idea. I haven't done that yet, but I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, because I'm working with a student right now to develop a program that would go around basically identifying properties that have enough excess land that they could be split by code. The person living in the home probably has no idea. And so then we would reach out to them and say, would you split your lot? Okay, yeah, offer it at no cost, essentially, since you weren't even thinking it was an opportunity anyway. We'll put the home on it, we'll get it set up, and then when it closes, we'll pay you for that land.
Yeah, I think
so.
Great.
Yeah, I'm going to put some ADUs on there from you, hopefully.
Okay, let's do it.
But I just want to wrap up with a couple of things, which are public-private partnerships and like strategic alliances. You've helped secure over 120 million in funding for large-scale projects by building strong partnerships. So how crucial are these public-private collaborations, to seeing more of this happen?
Yeah. I mean, I've always been a big advocate of public-private partnerships, and that's probably back to what I was saying in terms of, this sort of social entrepreneurship, sort of looking at the bigger picture and how an enterprise can play a role in doing that. I studied at the Wharton Business School, and public-private partnerships was like part of my focus area, and that was sort of the big thing 25 years ago, like PPP. So I think that they are definitely important, and certainly an avenue to pursue. I think that there's a lot. I mean, we've probably talked a lot about this. Some of the common barriers of, there's the zoning pieces that a lot of cities and states are already taking care of by making it, more of a right rather than a privilege to have an ADU. Looking at how industry partners can play a role in, supporting affordable models. Looking at how cities can play a role in streamlining things and making it easier for residents to purchase ADUs. So I think there's a lot of different ways that public-private partnerships can be used to support this. And I do think, like, if you're an affordable housing policymaker and you're looking at how am I going to house people, I just think that it's a very smart solution. It's not the only solution for sure, but it's a smart solution, and it has built into it a lot of, how do you align the incentives of the various stakeholders, the people who own the land, and people are going to move there, developer, et cetera, et cetera. I just think that you're capitalizing on a lot of assets already.
Yeah, and to me, the one way state government can do this and have the most influence would be expanding these catalog of homes, whereby we partner with vetted, trusted, successful groups like yours and maybe a handful of others to say these are their offerings. And then you as a local municipality, if you get your crap together, you incentivize this and do it. Maybe the state gives you a little bump in your revenue sharing or some other kind of like state resource that only the state can provide, as a carrot approach to doing this as opposed to a stick.
Yeah. I've seen California has supported SiteWorks through grant money to households that qualify, and that has been, a good incentive for people. So yeah, I think that there's all sorts of creative solutions there.
I want to make sure to include one final thing, which is looking ahead to the future.
Yeah.
You're such an innovative, creative leader. What's next for Origin Studios? Where do you kind of see modular ADUs and small scale sustainable housing heading in the next, 5 to 10 years?
Yeah. Well, I think we're at the beginning of a market that is developing. I mean, we really are. It was not in the lexicon and in the public discourse only a few years ago. Now, the fact that we're talking about it is just, it's kind of very exciting because we're at the beginning of this. And I think just because of the small footprint of ADUs, it just lends itself so well to modularity. I'm just really excited to see where we can take this. As from a company perspective, how can I build a more efficient company that can produce more of these and make them more accessible to people? So,
I do like that in your name too. It doesn't say ADU; it's Origin Studios. So you're not necessarily pigeonholing yourself to only an ADU. It could be a standalone home.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's right. Yeah. So I think for me, my future focus is building this enterprise, getting it, scaling it, proving its efficiency. Certainly within that, there's going to be development of new models and responding to market and interest there. And I think, like I've said, from a policy perspective and, like the fire victims in California, for example, the more I can get out and play a role, mobilizing solutions and, partnerships that are going to solve problems, that's going to be exciting for me and something, I really strive for. I think that the energy efficiency elements of this too, I love as a business owner, not being restricted to, I'm not restricted to what the market's offering me. I can put the pieces together to make it energy efficient. So like the nanotech heated floors I'm using, I don't see them anywhere. I don't know why, but they're cool as hell and they're super efficient. And I've got my
Yeah.
partner who provides them and they work wonderful. So, and I think the even like some of the things mandated in California, like they're really ahead on the environmental side, mandating things. So a lot of that's already working itself into my models. So my environmentalist hat, I think is excited about that and sustain.
It's a sticky wicket, right? Because that can be at odds with attainability for somebody that's a firefighter in a nurse household, let's say making a household income of 120K. The added mandates of the cost of housing, which are all supposed to be good for us, good for the environment. They're like, yeah, I would love to sign up for that idealism, but I actually can't afford to pay that ticket. And it only seems through the work that you're doing with broader scale, not just you, but others who are committed to this really ethos of putting in the high quality in the offsite production, which can have more scalability, thereby driving down the costs. Otherwise, you're paying $500-600 a square foot for a site built to meet these standards. Mm-hmm. It seems to me to be the only way out of it. Either that or we lower our standards, which we don't like to do in America, nor should we.
Yeah. And I think interrupting, I mean, there's so many, this is how we do it. This is how, this is how we've done it. This is how we do it. I think that mm-hmm. I'm able to interrupt a lot of that stuff by questioning it. And, and I see like at a policy perspective that happening too, like in all my years living overseas, heat pump air conditioners are just standard, but they're only just becoming more, known in the U.S. So we're so behind in some regards. So, the ability
and beholden to these petroleum-based products. Yeah. Well, this has been a great conversation. I feel like we could probably talk all afternoon, but thanks, unfortunately, Matt. The weather and time is limiting us. But if there's like one mindset shift or a small action that you hope listeners would take away from this conversation, what would that be? And then where could folks find more about you?
Yes, I would say start with what is in your control. I'm a big asset-based, I have this, expression also of arigato, the Japanese thank you. It's like, let's start from what you have. Don't be what I don't have. What do I have? And I think looking into your own yard, your own house, your own neighborhood, I think is where everyone should start. Um, and I think that's just the most powerful place to start from. It's a good mindset, let's say. If you want to find out more about me, our website is originstudio.design, not .com or anything, .design. And we have all of our prices, all of our models. There's more background on me there. My email is brian@originstudio.design. And, you can get in touch with me at any of the contacts on the website. We also are pretty active on Instagram and social media, and we try and share all the stuff that's happening, a given busy week. So that's a great place.
I love it. I can't help but think back to an earlier guest that we had, Monty Anderson, who's in the Houston market in Texas, and he said the exact same thing that you did. Start with what you have.
Yeah.
And make the impact that you can locally. Don't try to change the whole world at once, eat the whole elephant at once. Just start with what you have. I think that's a very powerful message, and thank you for echoing.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well,
Brian, thanks for your time today.
Okay. Thank you, Matt. This has been great. I just really enjoyed this conversation.